everyone, welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. The topic for today is sealed records. I want to give you my perspective on whether I think buying records that are sealed and keeping them sealed is even worthwhile, and what my approach is in terms of keeping them or unsealing them. And I think I'm going to sort of forecast where we're headed with this because I actually have two records here, vintage pressings that I am going to unseal, and we're going to find out what's inside. So therefore, you kind of know where my head's at. But I thought this would be an interesting conversation, not just in terms of sort of the dramatic component of unsealing records, but buying sealed and ascertaining what might be inside, that kind of gives you more confidence, I guess, before you pull the trigger on a sealed record. So that's kind of some of the backdrop for this conversation. As always, if you could hit like and subscribe, that'd be great. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I post pretty much every day. You can. I'm at what_can_brown. All right, so for those of you who just want that dramatic component, I do have chapter stops. You can skip ahead and check out me sort of unsealing these two records. I'll also share with you how much I paid for them. But I did want to address the topic of sealed records a little bit more high level first for this video and offer a little context. The idea of a sealed record, keeping a record sealed, right? It's not a popular idea in the vinyl collecting community, is what I would say. And by the way, I don't keep records sealed with the idea that it gives me any sort of intrinsic value, or that if I keep it sealed, it'll go up in value or make me happier or anything like that, or to be able to show a sealed record. And obviously that's going to seem a little disingenuous when you consider what I'm doing here, but I am unsealing these records because I don't have value for them sealed. An observation, though, even more broadly than that I've made about the vinyl collecting hobby is that everyone wants to believe that they're doing it right and everyone else is wrong who doesn't agree with them. So even this idea of vinyl collecting, put in quotes, vinyl collecting, some people have a very adverse reaction to that. It isn't about the collecting aspect, people might say, it's about the music. That, seeing it as collecting and acquiring somehow contradicts the ability to sort of appreciate the music that's on the disc, or that maybe true wisdom is getting past the collection aspect and more towards the artistic statement, right? These very grandiose things that some people, I think, have in their heads. But that's not the only thing that people have adverse reaction to. Some people believe that the only way to buy vinyl, for example, is to buy in stores and not online, and that it's not really, you're not really participating if you're not buying in the store, or that you should only buy the originals because the reissues are a step removed, or that conversely, maybe you should prioritize condition and clarity of sound as a reason to justify why you should only buy high quality reissues versus holding on to a, say, G plus copy of an original, which I have done and continue to do. Um, and listen, there's lots of other ways though that people talk about their own approach as the optimal way to collect and position their approach against others. So there's stereo versus mono, or you can't appreciate an album unless you have a particular turntable or stylus or speakers. Or how about this? I've gotten accused of this. Why do you overanalyze the music? Because true appreciation of it is not thinking about it; it's just experiencing it, right? And I've also gotten, you shouldn't own so many records because you can't possibly listen to them all. And I agree with that. I can't listen to them all. But in my opinion, a lot of this criticism and argument comes from places of insecurity. Like, am I doing it the right way? Sort of focused on positioning your own thought process against others, and then using that to sort of pressure test, what you do as either a vinyl or a music appreciator. And I wanted to offer a little bit of that backdrop because I think that lends itself to this idea of sealed versus not sealed. Now, me myself, I'm not a sealed record person, but I'm also not going to go and criticize others who believe that they'd like to own a sealed copy, especially if they have another copy that they use for playing and they want to have that sealed copy. Do I own any sealed records? Let me put it this way: do I own any sealed records that are still sealed, say, like well after I've purchased them? No. And to the extent that I do, it's because I haven't had the opportunity to listen to them yet. Every now and then I'll find a record that I just stupidly shelved before I got the opportunity to spin it. Typically, I will have heard it digitally, and I just hadn't gotten a chance to spin it. And it's not because I think that they'll, you know, I personally don't think that over time records will increase in value simply because they are sealed. I think records will could increase in value simply because they're in great condition. And a byproduct of that, or maybe one of the causes of it being in great condition, is because it was sealed. And I will say that I do like buying records that are sealed because I can unseal them. Now, obviously, you may open yourself up to disappointment if they say a record is warped. You know, that's a real concern. Records that are kept in tight packaging, right, shrink wrap. You know, who knows if it's been exposed to certain storage conditions. There could even indeed be mold. I've opened a sealed record and found that there was mold on the record just because of exposure to humidity. And there may be even a higher likelihood, right, of a record being warped or exposed to humidity, because it was kept sealed rather than unsealing it. So, for me, I don't keep records that are sealed, and or at least not intentionally, and therefore I want to unseal these two so that you can share either in my disappointment or joy with these two records. All right, so the two titles again that I showed briefly: McCoy Tyner's Time for Tyner, and then Jutta Hipp's with Zoot Sims Blue Note 1530. These are both Blue Note records. They're both sealed. That tells us something even in and of itself, and I'm going to get into that. So let's first address McCoy Tyner's Time for Tyner. So I bought this on eBay from a eBay seller who goes by CD Maynard. And this record, I bought it recently, so you could look it up. But the asking price was $70. I put a buy it now or a best offer out there for 60 just to see if I could get it for a little cheaper, as I often do, and it was accepted. And what you'll see in the description is that it was listed. I think they had a great they had a great description actually, because they have no idea about the originality, so they didn't claim that it was an original. What they say is that it's a U.S. pressing. They say Liberty slash UA on the back, which is true. So down here in a very small print, it'll say Liberty slash UA. They say that it's sealed, and they say mint album, presumed to be mint, right? Because they have no idea what's inside. And then they say EX for the cover because of a small corner cut. So this one I would say is of questionable vintage. I've never owned a copy of Time for Tyner before, so I was excited to find a copy, again, potentially in great shape. From my research, this can either be one of a couple of different labels or a couple of different pressings. So it could either be that original blue and white Liberty label copy. That's what it would need to be if it was going to be original. It could also be any of a variety of early reissues. So it could be a what I call is the blue and black label, but also sort of Liberty UA copy. It could be the blue label with the black note logo. So the black note was a later blue note logo, which by the way doesn't appear on the back, but that doesn't necessarily tell us anything for this title. So it could be that label. It could even be what the quasi sort of 1975 version of the blue note label, which was all blue with a white uh, note label on it. If it's anything other than one of those, I'll be shocked. And obviously, I'm hoping for it to be an original. If I was a betting man, I'd say it's the blue label with black note. And if it is, here's the thing: when you're spending $60 on this record, don't get me wrong, it's kind of gone up in value recently. It is hard to get clean. I think I'll be happy with having, presumably a mint unwarped copy, as long as it's one of those couple of earliest editions. If it's like the blue label with white note logo on it, then I'll be disappointed. I will. So I'm hoping it's not that. And obviously, I took a gamble here, and there's no returning it once I unseal it. So otherwise, if you're guessing, if you're trying to like figure out beyond what it possibly could be, if you're looking for visual cues about this record to see what it might be, there's actually limited information that we can get from the outside. So the back does say Liberty, and it has the Blue Note Transamerica Corporation logo on the back. Obviously, there's no barcode here or other indicator that suggests that it isn't at least from the mid 70s or earlier. Incidentally, the original was released in 1969, so kind of keep that in mind. On the front, we do have a price tag, and this could tell us something. In this case, I don't think it tells us that much, but it theoretically could tell us something. So here we have a price tag from the disc shop, which doesn't have many sightings on the internet, but the little bit of research that I was able to conduct, I was able to learn that the disc shop was a shop in Washington, D.C. It was opened by a guy named Littman Danziger. It had at least a couple of locations at one point, and I believe the original location was open as early as 1947, specialized in classical and jazz. That primary location, I think it moved over time, but it closed in 1985, and there was one of its branches that lasted until 1995. So if you're thinking about 1947 to 1995, it could really be any of the additions that we just discussed. The other clue that we have here is a price tag of $2.99, which I did not pay, obviously. But $2.99 as a price point is reminiscent of, a discount LP from the early 70s. And so I think that we kind of know already that it's somewhere in there, right? Like we already know it's one of those four editions that I mentioned. Obviously, it does have this very tiny saw cut at the bottom, which is an indicator of either a promo or more likely discount merchandise. And I would say, generally speaking, I don't see saw cuts on original Blue Notes. Even from the Liberty era or the UA era, I typically see them on early reissues rather than originals. So there, we do have that data point. The only other data point is I actually sometimes weighing a record can tell you something, and I did put this on a scale. Weighs 246 grams. Remember, that's with cover. That's why it's more than, you'd think like, oh, 180 is like really heavy, right? But these early Liberty albums were not even that heavy. It's just that the cover and the shrink with it ends up taking it to the 246, including the cover. All right, so you can't do this more than once, so hopefully I don't mess up this take. So I'm gonna open this now, and we're gonna find out just whether or not I'm going to be disappointed. And hopefully nobody's critiquing my ability to open records. What I do is I take this like it's kind of like a pen device with a blade on it, right? And it's just easy to manipulate. So I already know that it's not an original, and the reason why is not because I've looked at the label, but because I just saw a glimpse of the inner sleeve. So you see this inner sleeve here with the blue notes on it. This is an indicator that this is at the very least the blue label with the black blue note note on it. Okay, I'm sorry, that's it's confusing, but it's a blue and mostly blue label, and it has like a black note on it, and that was the technically, I guess, a third pressing if you think about what I just ran down, but it could indeed be a fourth pressing. And again, that's what I'm hoping it's not. Like I think I'd still be happy if it was a blue label with the black note. So, so I am disappointed. And you could argue that I spent too much on this. So this is really the least of what it possibly could have been in my eyes. So it's the blue label with the white note. Theoretically, and here's the thing, it's a beautiful inner, so my guess is that it's not like it's highly unlikely this was re-shrink wrapped later. And so therefore it should be in excellent shape. And I'm hoping obviously there's no warps. So here's a better look um, at the label there. So in terms of kind of unpacking this, what this indicates is that this is a 1975 pressing. It is a repressing of the just that original stereo. And this album was originally mastered by Rudy Van Gelder, and so of course you'd want to look for evidence that this is a that this that Rudy's information is on here. And so the interesting thing that I'm seeing here is that, and this is actually represented on Discogs, so I'm not finding this out for myself for the first time. But Rudy Van Gelder's stamp is actually only on one side on this particular reissue. On the original, it would be on both, but on this particular reissue, it was not. So what that means is that for side, is it one? Yeah, side one, they used the original metalwork, and on side two, it was remastered. Now, I don't know exactly why that would be. I do know that there was a remastering engineer for United Artists, and it's possible that either because they were trying to press this in different locations and they weren't able to get the metal work, or maybe there was something wrong with it. I'm not exactly sure. All we can do is guess. But the point is that this particular pressing does not use Rudy Van Gelder's metalwork for side two. It only uses it for side one. jury's out on whether that actually impacts the sound. But in any event, and otherwise, what I'm looking at here is that I'm not seeing any indication that there is a warp. This looks pretty flat, which I think is a win. There's no other sort of major issues with it. There's not even a large amount of dust. There's a little bit of like paper dust just from it being kept in a paper sleeve. But otherwise, here's the thing. Did I overpay? Yeah, probably overpaid. Looking at the Discog prices, the highest that this particular pressing has gone for is $38. Now, I will say that if you're looking at the ability to purchase this exact pressing right now, getting one in near mint condition is going to cost you what I paid. It's going to cost you about $60 on Discogs. But I tend to think, in my mind, this is probably closer to a $35 item. I bet that if you waited, you could get it for that. And so, it turns out what I did in terms of taking a risk on a sealed record didn't entirely pay off. I guess what I still have is a theoretically a great sounding record, and I didn't have a copy before, and I'm going to be hard pressed to find one in cleaner condition. If you're asking me whether this is a good investment, probably not. Probably not. All right, so we're moving on to number two. Let's see what happens with this one. Actually, it's a little bit simpler story with this one. So this is Hipp's self-titled album with Zoot Sims under Blue Note catalog number 1530. With this title, we actually have more certainty, at least in terms of what pressing it is, even if less certainty about its condition. So like, was this resealed at some point? We don't know. Is it warped? We don't know. So those are some of the questions, whereas which pressing it is, probably not as much open to interpretation. So this record was originally released in 1957, which not only would that pressing be heavier, it couldn't possibly have been originally put in shrink wrap like this. So this is not that edition. It's not the 1957. So what edition it must be, according to Discogs, is the second pressing released in 1972, because there was no other repressing of this in the United States until at least a decade later. That 1972 edition would be on the blue and white United Artists label. If it's on a different label, it's a listing that isn't on Discogs yet, and I'll have to put it in there. But in any event, thinking it's that United Artists pressing. So this one was originally, I believe, would have originally been, like engineered by Rudy Van Gelder, and would have had the etched RVG. But because this is a reissue, I have, high confidence that they did not use the original metalwork for this pressing. And so what it would have is instead the initials of Ralph Eck, who is the engineer at United Artists. It would have his initials in the run out and not Rudy Van Gelder's. Otherwise, looking at this cover, it still does have the, what does it have? It has the Lexington address right there on the back, despite that address obviously being out of date. It does have a small saw cut, a little bit bigger saw cut actually than the McCoy Tyner. And I did weigh this as well. It's 241 grams, so just 5 grams less than the McCoy. And the reason why I'm putting that out there is just because if anybody at some point decides to reference a sealed record and wants to say like, oh, what this might be, is there something we could possibly learn based on the weight of the record and whether it corresponds with, say, Original Liberty or what? That's why I'm putting that out there. Otherwise, this is only instructive for us to compare the two and say that they're within 5 grams, which is probably within the margin of error. So again, let's see what this one is. I think that there's less mystery, generally speaking. Oh, wait. Hold on. Before I do this, I want to let you know, I don't want to forget and not tell you what I paid for it. So this one, I paid more than the McCoy Tyner, and maybe that goes without without me saying so. But I paid $99.99, so $100 is what I paid for this. Now you might ask, why would I pay $100 for something I already know is a reissue? Well, the original goes for thousands. I've never owned an original. I do have the Disc Union copy that was sourced from digital sources, and so I'm kind of looking for possibly something that's going to wow me a little bit more than even that Disc Union copy. And even though this is original, or this is a reissue, it's in mono. It was not originally recorded in stereo, and as far as I know, it's never been rechanneled for stereo. So to get an original mono, or even get a early reissue of a mono, I think is still worth something, and the market would tend to agree. So looking at Discogs right now, the highest price that this has gone for is $197. Possibly when it's sealed, it goes for that, right? And otherwise, if you were going to try to get something in similar condition, you're spending at least $130. So in my mind, if I'm thinking about, will something, retain its value, and what's it worth, and should I even buy it? Is it worth it to me? Like, those are just some of my considerations that went into it. All right, so um, I'm gonna continue to open this now. So what we have here is just a white sleeve, and as expected, and it's always fun when they have the bent over corners for you. They did that. They did that for a lot of new editions, so that stuff wouldn't kind of slide out just as soon as you open it. So, as expected, you've got the mono United Artists label here. Also, as expected, there's no Van Gelder metalwork. You do have those initials by Mr. Eck. And I'm not seeing any issues with slight smudge, maybe. Yeah, just a slight smudge. It's probably an old fingerprint. It's always weird to look at fingerprints, considering it probably hasn't been exposed in decades. And this record also is similarly flat. I'm not seeing any indications that this is warped. So I think that's a win. It wasn't resealed at some point. It's very clean. It's not warped. It is mono, and this one I kind of knew. I knew what I was getting into a little bit more, just because there aren't as many reissues of this particular title. So, I mentioned earlier, everybody has different mentalities. There's probably a lot of folks out there that are like, you ruined the value of these sealed records. And then there's other people that are like, well, you didn't do that and you should have opened it, but you still paid too much. But here, listen, I wanted these records. I wanted to have these records in great condition, be able to play them and appreciate them. And for me, it was worth it to get something that I knew was going to be clean. Obviously, I'm disappointed with McCoy Tyner. I'm not saying that. And I do think that I paid more than it's worth. Um, but this is just part of the joys of this hobby, right? So I'm not overall not that disappointed. I mean, my day's not going to be it's not going to, $20 isn't of money I shouldn't have spent is not going to make or break my day, and maybe that's sort of privileged thinking, but look at me, I'm surrounded by vinyl, and this is what I love, and I love the process, and I love finding records that I'm going to get enjoyment out of spinning. So sue me. So anyway, that's the topic for today. That's all I really wanted to cover. I know I covered a few controversial topics, so feel free to put some of your comments in the comments section, and let me know what your thoughts are on on me spending this money and just unsealing them immediately for you. But just know that my enjoyment starts afterward, when I get to now play these. So that's it for now, and I'll see you next time.